against the Lord, nor rebel against us in building you an altar beside the altar of the Lord our God, or besides the altar of the Lord our God. Did not Achan the son of Zerah commit a trespass in the accursed thing, and wrath fell on all the congregation of Israel, and that man perished not alone in his iniquity? Then the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh answered and said unto the heads of the thousands of Israel, The Lord God of gods, the Lord God of gods, He knoweth, and Israel He shall know. If it be in rebellion or if in transgression against the Lord, save us not this day, that we have built us an altar to turn from following the Lord, or if to offer thereon burnt offerings or meat offering, or if to offer peace offerings thereon, let the Lord Himself require it. And if we have not rather done it for fear of this thing, saying, In time to come your children might speak unto our children, saying, What have you to do with the Lord God of Israel? For the Lord hath made Jordan a border between us and you. Ye children of Reuben, children of Gad, ye have no part in the Lord. So shall your children make our children cease from fearing the Lord. Therefore we said, Let us now prepare to build us an altar, not for burnt offering, nor for sacrifice, but that it may be a witness between us and you and our generations after us, that we might do the service of the Lord before Him with our burnt offerings, with our sacrifices, and with our peace offerings. That your children may not say to our children in the time to come, Ye have no part in the Lord. Therefore said we, that it shall be, when they should say so, shall so say to us, or to our generations in time to come, that we may say again, Behold, the pattern of the altar of the Lord, which our fathers made, not for burnt offerings, nor for sacrifice, but it is a witness between us and you. God forbid that we should rebel against the Lord, and turn this day from following the Lord to build an altar for burnt offerings, for meat offerings, for sacrifices, beside the altar of the Lord our God that is before His tabernacle. And when Phinehas the priest and the princes of the congregation, heads of the thousands of Israel which were with him, heard the words that the children of Reuben, children of Gad, children of Manasseh spake, it pleased them. And Phinehas the son of Eleazar the priest said unto the children of Reuben, to the children of Gad, to the children of Manasseh, This day we perceive that the Lord is among us, because ye have not committed this trespass against the Lord. Now ye have delivered the children of Israel out of the hand of the Lord. And Phinehas the son of Eleazar the priest and the princes returned from the children of Reuben, from the children of Gad, out of the land of Gilead unto the land of Canaan, to the children of Israel, and brought them word again. And the thing pleased the children of Israel. And the children of Israel blessed God, and did not intend to go up against them in battle, to destroy the land wherein the children of Reuben and Gad dwelt. And the children of Reuben, children of Gad, called the altar Ed, for it shall be witness between us that the Lord is God. Long passage, but a good passage to gain understanding from. The altar of remembrance. The whole passage is about this altar that we read about in chapter 10. That they said, hey, we need something that will be a remembrance for our children, and something that will say to the other tribes, we're with you. We're part of it. We're on your side. Just because we're on the other side of the Jordan doesn't mean we're apart from you. But we have here, number one, the misunderstanding. There was a misunderstanding. And there was a misunderstanding on both parts in this. First of all, the misunderstanding concerning the 2.5 tribes. All right? Now, I don't want to say the law, because I'm not sure that the law would be the right thing, but the understood law was that there was only one altar of worship. There was only one altar of worship, because what had happened in the past, when they built another altar, besides the one that was with the tabernacle, when they built another altar, it was not for worship of God, because that's what that altar was for. And so if they built another altar, they were doing something else with it. So there was only one altar of worship for the land, and the perception was that this was another altar of worship. And so the children of Israel, the other side, the 10.5 tribes, or 9.5 tribes, said, well, there's something wrong here. They've built a massive altar. They're going to do a lot of sacrificing and things like that. And so there was a misunderstanding there. Now, we need to be careful to avoid the appearance of evil. We should be careful to avoid the appearance of evil. they are doing nothing wrong. And I don't have this written down on here anywhere, but they probably should have sent a representative. They probably should have sent someone to Joshua, to someone to say, hey, listen, we're building another altar, but it is not for sacrifice. It's not for burnt offerings. It's not for peace offerings. It is a testimony between us and you. What they said in their defense, they should have sent someone to say that. They didn't do that. What they were doing to them was an innocent thing. They were not trying to cause problems. But we ought to be careful about those kinds of things. Now, I know that we live in an age, and I've probably been guilty of this thought process. Well, it's not my problem. I'm doing the right thing. If they got a problem with it, that's their problem. I know I'm guilty of that, and that's the wrong attitude to have. That's the wrong attitude to have. That's not even what their attitude was in this, though. They just were doing something they thought was innocent. And we should be careful to avoid the appearance of evil, to avoid controversy. To avoid controversy. Now, I know some people enjoy controversy. They relish controversy. I've got a brother, my older brother, relishes controversy. He enjoys it. I don't enjoy controversy. I'm not saying he does things to bring stuff on like that. He just doesn't have a problem with addressing situations and being addressed. It's just not a big deal to him. But we should be careful to avoid those things so that we can avoid controversy. In church, some of the biggest problems in church come because of a misunderstanding. Because I heard or observed something and I perceived something that wasn't even true about what was going on. And I made an assumption. And I perceived something and it's a misunderstanding. We should avoid the appearance of evil to avoid dishonoring God. I'm going to tell you one of the hardest things to overcome in modern day Christianity, I'll just say it that way, is church problems in the world. One of the hardest things to overcome in witnessing to people, in speaking to Christians about getting in church. One of the hardest things to overcome is church controversy. Because it's dishonoring to God, and it's just a difficult thing. Now, letter C, to avoid hindering the weak. It's to avoid, as Paul writes, to avoid causing a stumbling block for a weaker Christian. Now, it doesn't mean just because somebody gets offended that you're wrong, okay? I'm not saying that. Whenever the Bible talks about weaker brethren, there are certain things you ought not do so that you don't offend a weaker brethren. It doesn't mean that you don't do this simply because Dave doesn't like it. Dave's been saved for, 200 years now? For 60 years? Almost 60 years. Dave's not a weaker brethren. And I'm not saying that Dave gets offended at things. I'm sure he probably does. But it doesn't mean that Dave doesn't like something. He says, hey, I don't like that. He's not a weaker brethren. But there are people that come into the church. They're newly saved. They're not strong Christians. And whenever we don't even think about certain things, we just make certain assumptions, and we say or do something, and that weaker Christian, the baby goes, well, that's not really what you're supposed to do, is it? And there sometimes is a misunderstanding, and we need to avoid those so that we can avoid hindering the weak. We should expect to sometimes be misunderstood. Okay? Now, that's not easy. That's a lot easier to say than it is to practice. to say that we should expect to be misunderstood. And I give you 2 reasons why we should expect to be misunderstood. Number 1, we are human. I have found myself being, I don't like the word offended, but I'll use it. Being offended at things that I've done similarly and thought other people were crazy for responding the way I responded. I have found myself doing that, and I thought, you idiot. But we're human. We make mistakes. We do and say things innocently. Not long after we got here, I was saying hi, shaking hands, and not able to get to every single person, and I missed somebody. And it got word to me they thought I didn't like them. There was no intent in that. I mean, it was not a thought of that at all. And I was taken back. But I guess we should expect sometimes to be misunderstood because we are human and we misunderstand. We mistake things. And second of all, others are humans. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We're going to have misunderstandings. And I think one of the problems that we have when we have misunderstandings, one of the problems is that we don't realize we're human and we're going to have misunderstandings. And that's okay. You work through them. I remember whenever we were going through premarital counseling with my dad, he was talking about, and I've used this a number of times, it works well with more than just marriage, but he was talking about whenever you have an argument, whenever you have a disagreement, and you feel one way and you feel another, and there's a crack in the chain, if you will. There seems to be a weakening of the chain. Well, whenever you come to an agreement on that, it's like welding that chain. It's like putting a weld in the chain. You've come to an agreement on something and you've solidified that. And I'm not a metallurgist or anything like that, but what I understand is when you put a weld on something, that weld becomes stronger than the rest of the metal. And so in churches, it ought to be the same way as it should be in a marriage, that whenever you have a disagreement, you come to an agreement on that. You work it out. Instead of just saying, we're done, you say, let's work it out. Let's make a new bond, and it becomes stronger. The same thing can happen in a church. The problem is we say, well, it's a misunderstanding, and we don't even come to terms with the fact that we're all human. We don't all like the same thing. And I've used this before. If we were going to paint that wall, 9 people, I bet we'd have 4 different opinions at least on what color we ought to paint that wall right there. That's one reason we didn't ask for opinions on what color to paint the wall, is because everybody's got a different opinion. And if Jessica says, I like the tan color right there, and Miss Marie says, well, I think it ought to be a dark brown. She says, I think it ought to be a dark brown. Yeah. Let's use somebody else. Let's just say, yeah, I know you do. You like orange a lot. Let's say Marie says, no, it should be a dark brown. Well, if we decide that we're going to go with that color, well, now not only has she been rejected, we picked the pastor's wife's color. And now, but that's how we are. We're humans. And so we need to understand that we are going to be misunderstood. And then number 5, we should be willing to explain ourselves. And I've got in parentheses, to those with real concerns. Because let's just face it, there are people who cause problems that don't care. They don't care one bit about what the reason is. They just want to cause a problem. And the Bible says, answer not a fool according to his folly. And so you avoid those things. But when someone has a real concern about something, we shouldn't have a problem if we're doing everything right. We shouldn't have a problem. We should be able to explain ourselves to them. So you have, on the one hand, you have the 2.5 tribes involved in this misunderstanding. Then you have the rest of Israel involved in this understanding, the 9.5 tribes. Now, to their credit, number one, their zeal. Their zeal. Word gets to them, they get up in arms about it. I mean, they're ready to. They've conquered the land, and they sound like Christians. I'm just telling you, they've conquered the land. They've been apart for less than a week. They're going their way. And they hear what's happening. They hear gossip. It's not validated. Yes, there's an altar, but it's not for burnt offerings. They hear gossip. They hear that they've built an altar. Well, now let's go kill them. Let's go to war. We're going to go destroy them if they're going to rebel against the Lord. Zeal for God's honor is always commendable. Okay? However, a caveat, letter B, zeal should be under the direction of God. It always bothers me, when people refer to the fight of the Crusaders as a Christian war. There was nothing God directed about the Crusades. That was about money. It was about power. It was about possession of the land of Jerusalem. And it was a religious, they call it a holy war. There was not anything about that directed of God. Now, we can be zealous for God, but I think sometimes in our zeal for God, we sometimes leave God out of it. We say, well, this is how I feel, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to fight this battle because that's what God. Well, if God calls you to it, it's none of my business. I guess it's none of my business either way. But if we're going to be zealous for God, we got to be zealous for the things of God, and not just for the things of Adam. We oftentimes I see it, on social media. People they defend Trump, and I'm not saying that Trump's wrong. I'm not saying it, but they defend Trump like it's a God-ordained thing, and we've got to be very careful about that. That my political position is of God. To say my political position is of God, therefore I'm going to defend my political position. I know that there are things in my political position that I follow as the God. I mean, abortion for one. I'm anti-abortion because it's wrong. It's just wrong. I'm not anti-abortion because I'm Republican. I'm anti-abortion because it's wrong to do. But we need to be careful that our zealousness, our zeal, is under the direction of God. We should take care to investigate the problem before creating a war. Now, to their credit, they sent Phineas. They sent Phineas, and they were ready to go, and then they said, no, let's send a group to find out what's going on before we take this. But they've got battle gear. They're ready to, they've got it back out of the tent. They're ready to go into battle with these 2.5 tribes. And they said, no, let's find out. Let's find out. Let's hear them, and let's go from there. All right? So we need to do it. We should do that. Y'all know what I mean when I say we, right? Me. We tend to not do that. We tend to attack. We tend to just assume things and attack. Man, I'm preaching at me tonight, aren't I? Number 2, the concern. The concern. Now, why are they coming? What are they so worried about? What are they so worried about? Well, they're worried about the history. There was a situation concerning Baal Peor. Turn back, if you will, to Numbers 25. We actually looked at this several weeks ago at a glance. But Numbers 25, they're involved with Israel, Bodh, and Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. So they're in the wrong place. They're doing the wrong thing. Verse 3, and Israel joined himself unto Baal Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. This is a one-time thing. Now, when I say it's a one-time thing, I don't mean like they just, one afternoon, this happened. This was for a couple of days. This took place, but it was just a one event. It was just a one event. They did not come back to this, but it was a one event. Okay? So you read down through here. Verse 5, Moses said unto the judges of Israel, slay ye every one his men that were joined unto Baal Peor. Verse 8, he went after the man of Israel into the tent, thrust both of them through, the man of Israel, the woman through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel. So God sent a plague. Verse 9, and those that died in the plague were 24,000. 24,000. They didn't build an altar at this time. They joined themselves in worship. They worshiped with another group of people, a false god, Baal Peor, and they come in chapter 22 and in verse 17 is the iniquity. Now, if you go back, I'm not going to do it right now, but if you go back to chapter 25 of Numbers, Phinehas is involved in that as well. He's involved in the carrying out some of the judgment. And so this is the same Phinehas that comes to them in verse 17. Is the iniquity of Peor or Baal Peor too little for us? Was that not enough? Guys, y'all remember Baal Peor? The situation there? Was that not enough? And I've got down here, they only had worshipped once, really. And God sent a plague destroying 24,000 people. And so their concern is, okay, this was a one-time event. And look what God did. You've built an altar. You're gonna offer sacrifices and offerings on this altar as a continual thing? What do you think is going to happen? That's why they're ready to go to war. That was their concern, because God destroyed much of the camp. A pretty big deal. I mean, that's 24,000 people dying in a short period of time. That's pretty heavy. Then you have the situation concerning Achan. And that's back in Joshua chapter 7. We know that one, where they were forbidden to take of anything from Jericho, and Achan took a few little things. And under this, number one, I don't mean this to sound the way it sounds on paper, okay? But he simply kept what was set apart for the Lord. All right, this is a one-time event. And I don't mean that stealing from the Lord is a non-event. It's not what I'm saying. But Achan didn't set up an altar. He just put a few things in his cloak and got out of there with it. He didn't set up an altar. He wasn't looking to worship a false god. He disobeyed. As I understand, that's a bad thing. I'm not trying to make light of disobedience to God. But because of that, 36 men died at Ai. And there was trouble in the camp. And it says, verse, I missed. I'll say it's 17. No, 20. 20, yeah, verse 20. Did not Achan the son of Zerah commit a trespass in the accursed thing, and the wrath fell on the congregation of Israel? And that man perished not alone in his iniquity. And here you're wanting to build an altar? He took from the Lord, but he didn't die alone in that. That was the act of one man on his own. And it cost 36 other men their lives because of what he did. And you're wanting to set up an altar. That's their concern. That's the concern. They said it over and over, that you're rebelling. Why would you want to rebel against the Lord? And I commend them for that. If in the book of Judges there had been that attitude, the book of Judges would be a different book. But they didn't have that attitude for most of the book. At least here they're saying, listen, Phinehas is saying, why are you wanting to rebel? We're here. We've got peace, rest. Why are you wanting to rebel? And so that was their concern. A misunderstanding, but their concern is right. And I want you to see their explanation. The explanation. Now, if this had been, I've worked through this in a church setting. Okay? Not the same exact thing, but this idea that here, people in the church approach somebody about something. And you know what the reaction is oftentimes? Defensive. I'm a Christian. I'm doing right. Hey, what business is it of yours to ask me? You don't have any idea what I was doing. You have no right to ask me about this, and on and on and on, how we sometimes respond. But look what they did. And I probably ought to have these in reverse order. But letter A, their explanation was truthful. They were truthful about it. They didn't try to make up a story. They didn't try to, cover up anything. They were simply truthful. They said, hey, listen, this is a witness between us and you. And not just for now, but for our children to come, that we are, and their concern was, in a generation or two, your children are going to say to our children, you're on the other side of Jordan. You're not a part of it. The half of tribe of Manasseh that was on the western side of Jordan saying to the other half of the tribe of Manasseh, a bunch of rebels, why are you over there? Why aren't you in this place? But their explanation was truthful. And then second of all, and I think this is about as important as anything, their explanation was given with the right attitude. How often have we in churches had a misunderstanding, innocent? I mean, nothing's been done wrong. Nothing's out of place. There's a misunderstanding, and a question arises. And all it took was a truthful answer with the right attitude. An approach. Phinehas came with the right attitude. Are you rebelling against God? I mean, don't you know what this brought down? And his concern is right. But oftentimes the approach of those who are quote-unquote concerned is wrong. And then the response of the questioned is wrong. And how often has a church split in half because the response to the question was either not truthful or done with the wrong attitude? How dare you ask me this? In our explanation, no matter, we've got to consider more than just ourselves. And that's hard to do. It's hard to consider more than me. Because I matter. It's hard to consider how is my response going to affect others. I don't say this to lift me up. I don't say this as we were in a hard time. I'm going to go ahead and turn this mic off.